Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the regular session. It's Monday, November 8th, 2021 of the Fall River Housing Authority regular meeting. Attorney Souza.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The language for the open meeting law is as follows. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible.
Thank you. Ms. Gallagher, roll call, please.
Chairwoman Sahadi.
Here.
Vice Chairman Underhill.
Here.
Commissioner Burns.
Here.
Commissioner Bentley.
Here.
Commissioner Medeiros.
Here.
Thank you. Do we have any citizens' input this evening? Seeing none, do we have residents' input this evening?
Thank you, Mary. Just a
You're
couple
welcome.
quick notes. The residents this past weekend attended the Mass Union of Public Housing Tenants Conference in Norwood. Got some interesting information, met with some DHCD folks, no HUD folks showed up. We're still distributing soup. Everybody seems happy. We had a little problem. I just talked to Ed Majewski about it. Somebody came up one of the sidewalks and decided to run over part of the Bill King Memorial a couple weeks ago. Other than that, that's it. Thank you.
Great,
Oh,
thank you.
one last thing. We're going to be running some elections in the month of December. Looks like Holmes Apartments, Olivera, and maybe here.
Okay, excellent. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is the minutes of the postponed regular meeting held October 14th, 2021. The recommended action is to accept them.
Motion to accept minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 3 is bills and communications. A are the vouchers. You have those in your packet. The recommended action is to accept the vouchers.
Motion to accept the vouchers.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 4 are the management reports. You have the 8 management reports included in your packet. Item 1 is the applications. 2 are the occupancy reports. 3 is the tenant accounts receivable. 4 are the work order report. 5 is the monthly Section 8 voucher activity report. 6 is the monthly personnel count/report. 7 is the Director of Modernization monthly report. And number 8 is the bank investment and bond debt balance report. Do I have a motion to accept these?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Any questions or concerns regarding any of these reports? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 5 are your monthly financial reports. Item A is your financial report for the period ended September 2021. Item B is your state quarterly monetization report for the quarter ending September 30, 2021. And C is your state quarterly operating statement for the same quarter ending 9/30/2021. Our Director of Finance is here this evening. If anyone has any questions, the recommended action is approval of these 3 reports.
I don't know if she has anything to present to us or anything out of the ordinary or just kind of all the same here, just moving along okay? Oh. Okay, thank you. Motion to approve the financial reports.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item D is the state budget for 2022. It's for the 400-1 program. The recommended action is approval for resubmission to DHCD. Amber, do you want to speak to that?
Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
So obviously I started in June of 2021. This was submitted prior to me starting with the Housing Authority, and it kept getting reverted back. With much effort, I finally got someone from DHCD on the phone, and they pretty much said that all of the other program numbers were in line and fine. However, this is the only one that the budget we submitted, the revenues were actually less than the expenses. So we had to revert it back and make it so that the expenses would be less than the revenue. The way that it reads, it seems like the revenue doesn't include the subsidy. So when you read the line items in line, it says the revenue would be 2.3 total expenses. The revenue actually already includes the subsidy. So when you're reading it, it kind of, that's where I'm thinking the hiccup came last time. So when we were submitting it to DHCD, I talked to one of the reps over there, and they pretty much said that we submitted a budget that had a deficit, so they would never approve it, so we had to just bring it back. So I went through some of the items, and anything that we had listed for expenses that were something that we have not used to date we basically just took out to get it in line so that they would approve, because we also needed a 35% reserve as well, so we had to make sure that that was in balance. So we are finally at a point where we can submit and put this budget behind us so that I can start with the next one.
Excellent. Does anyone have any questions or follow-up questions with regard to this 400-1 program? Hearing none, do I have a recommended action to approve the resubmission to DHCD?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor? Thank you, Amber.
Aye.
Item 6 is an update from the Executive Director.
Good evening. You have received a handout this evening on the Resident Council and Housing Authority case study. I want you to take a look at this. This was an event that was basically attended by Commissioner Underhill, who worked with the was it DHCD or HUD? It was HUD. With HUD on developing I guess a manual, if you will, a handout for future and other resident advisory boards between their PHA and themselves. And if you read through it, I thought it was a very well structured report dealing with what the jurisdiction of the resident council is, what they do with the tenant participation funds that are provided by the Housing Authority, what they do for training, and their involvement with the PHA annual plan. First of all, I want to thank you, Commissioner Underhill, for your favorable light of the relationship between the resident board and the Housing Authority. We too think it's a good relationship, mutual benefits.
Work well together, Like I mentioned in the article, no problems. We've never wanted for anything. Whenever we ask you, you've always come through, and the Housing Authority's been really good to us. So I hear Ed mentioned maybe at a conference over the weekend, and I hear a lot of horror stories from across the state, different housing authorities that have no relationship whatsoever with their tenant councils or their, tenant advocacy groups. So it's a pleasure to work with, a group that has the same interests we have at heart. So
it's great to hear.
Excellent.
Great to hear. And speaking of the involvement with the annual plan, Kevin will again be chairing that event, which should start this month in November. And the annual plan, for you who don't know, is where we present any changes in policies, procedures, any new HUD regs that we have to implement, or any new endeavors that are significant to the operations of the Housing Authority. We first review those with the Resident Advisory Board to get their comments, their opinions on the matters. And then that is, we hold a public hearing in the end to get the public's input, and then that plan is presented to the board for approval, which then becomes our working document with HUD for the next 12 months. So I think we have scheduled a few meetings in November on that.
Excellent.
Earlier this month, we received a notice, well, later this month, I should say, which was actually only a few days ago, about OSHA requiring some mandated vaccinations or COVID testing on any employer with over 100 employees. And this was in an effort to assist employers with getting everyone vaccinated, I guess to put it lightly. So by December 5th is when the authority, if we are subject to it, we haven't heard that we're not, and we haven't heard that we definitively are, so we're still looking into that. The personnel director, Mr. Burke, is checking with various other resources on that. But what we would be required to do is, for anyone not vaccinated, would be required to wear a mask whenever they are in the building or in a vehicle with someone else, and they would also be subject to weekly COVID testing. All right, and so we'll wait and see how that plays out. And we'll develop a policy accordingly with that, with the federal law. Right now, we have, I think, well over 80% of our employees are vaccinated, Tim. Would you agree with that? Yes. So we have a good percentage vaccinated, and we'll be reaching out to them this week to make them aware of this, just kind of be a little proactive, and then update our numbers as well with, who's been vaccinated or not. One item in tonight's agenda is to purchase 3 John Deere subtractors. And what I'd like to ask the board, though, is that we're all facing this crisis before us of global warming. As much as we don't think we can be affected by it or that we can affect it, I think on both counts we can play a part in this as a housing authority. Okay, we all know it's a crisis, and we all know there's a big shift in people looking at various avenues to deal with it. So I thought this would be a good place to start. And what I would suggest to the board is that instead of purchasing gas-operated vehicles, we purchase all electric vehicles. It's a small token, if you will, gesture towards that endeavor, but it's a good place to start. Instead of having gasoline gas carts going throughout our developments, why not have electric? Okay, there's less parts in electric vehicles. They have to be plugged in. We're fortunate that over 60% of our electricity comes from solar. So the argument that, well, you're plugging it in and using coal to generate electricity really doesn't hold for us, because we purchase a good amount. We have 2 solar fields, by the way, Jack.
Oh, really?
That we lease from. So I talked with Ed Majewski. He thought they'd be about $2,000 more each. I'm not sure what we'd have to do on a procurement end for that, but I'd like to recommend that we go in that direction and further down the road develop a policy that all our vehicles be electric, as long as they can perform their task. We have snow plowing, which may be some hindrance because you might need that extra horsepower, I'm not sure, but definitely our vans, other vehicles, there's no reason why we shouldn't be looking in that direction. So just some thought for you when we get to that item tonight.
Are you talking like golf carts, or are you talking larger vehicles?
Well, right now on the agenda are the golf cart type vehicles, but yes,
Yeah.
I am going forward. I'd like to just see a switch over to electric. Exactly.
Do you have any EV charging stations at any locations?
No, we do not. So that would have to be part of the conversation. Yes. A use of capital funds would pay for those. Sure. But that's a discussion down the road.
Yeah, I mean, you could do what we did on campus at Bristol, is like over 90% of the cost of the EV charging stations is subsidized through Mass EVIP, as well as your electric company, whether you're in National Grid or Eversource. So between the two of them, like almost everything is covered for the cost of installation, and they install them. So it's something to look into. They only get so much money per year, and it's a long, not a long waiting period, but it's something to do. It'd probably be good for the residents too, in case anybody has a car
Electric
they can
car.
plug in.
Okay, all right, I will have a conversation with you when we start on that endeavor. I would think in the next month or two, why not generally, and put a policy in front of the board to consider. And again, I think it's, it'd be for our welfare, for the residents' welfares, for our children's welfare, their children's. It's definitely a directional goal for the authority to get out there in front of, I think.
1 second. Commissioner Burns, did you?
Different issue, but on the executive's report. Can I ask a question?
Sure,
Okay, my turn.
your turn.
You had mentioned the vaccine mandate. Just hoping that you could work with through collective bargaining, work with the unions so they're part of the process. There are some unintended consequences. So I know there's a mandate. If it applies to us, they either have to do it or they got to deal with something else. But if someone takes the shot, sometimes you get sick from the vaccine. Sometimes, your only time for an appointment is during work hours. So I would like the authority to kind of work with the unions and make sure that we're covering all our bases, make sure we're solving problems that may happen. People could have reactions to the vaccine. People could have, trouble, like I said, getting appointments. So let's be kind to them and let them get some time during work if that's the case. And if they get sick, I would hope there's something we could do to. I was sick from the vaccine. Look at that! I just violated my own privacy rights. It kicked my butt for a day and a half. And if it happens to someone in the authority, I mean, again, we got a mandate. If they comply, that's great. But I think we should, work with them via collective bargaining and making sure they're taken care of. So that's it.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, we are meeting with them. Another item I had, which, I'll just jump ahead to that, is we are meeting with them to impact bargain on a couple items next week. So we can add that, although the final rule is not out. I guess it's out, but just as far as whether it's a certainty to the authority, we're not yet sure. But we will be meeting with the union next week to impact bargain on one item is snow removal and the potential need for contractors. And that has to do with getting the employees into work for snow removal. There's an issue of union representation, when they can meet with their union rep on an as-needed basis. So we're going to talk about that. We recently tested some individuals for promotion to painter. We're going to be talking about that process and the validity of doing testing, because there was some concern about that. And we're going to be talking about a drug and alcohol testing policy for employees suspected of being under the influence of or using during work. So we have those 4 items, and we can definitely work in the 5th item.
It's always time to throw something else in there, right?
Well, we do start negotiating with them, actually, a whole new contract in March, so, but these are things that have popped up of recent, so we'll see how far we get into each one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah.
I have one question. Do you have anything on any new hires that they're required to be vaccinated?
Yes, we do. We require them to be vaccinated. Yeah, we've had that for a few months.
I think we actually discussed that here at a meeting.
I think so.
We did.
We have a policy, and I mentioned it, yeah. Yeah, just for new hires. And speaking of new hires, we have a process for applicants for housing. Let me digress to that. Who have, if they have a former criminal offense, HUD has different guidelines as to when you can accept them into housing. Okay, several years ago, if they had committed a larceny 20 years prior, well, sorry, you have a query, you can't get in. So HUD came up with some guidelines a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, maybe more. I'm not sure. Kathleen's not here, I see, but she would know. Oh, yeah, I don't know. How long ago was that, Kathleen? Do you know?
It was 2015.
All right, so it's quite a while ago. And that's for new applicants. And it's basically referred to as a look-back period. So if, let me just see my notes here.
I don't have to steal anything from you this time. But I didn't bring my bag.
So if an individual had an assault and battery that was 8 years ago, HUD just requires us to deny them if it was 7 years or sooner, okay? Breaking and entering, 5 years. So there's different years. So it kind of makes sense that when we're looking at candidates for employment, that if HUD feels these are acceptable to allow new applicants to become residents, then as an employer, you know, we should have some way to be able to analyze and come up with a decision in a reasonable and consistent manner with applicants for employment. So what I'm going to be doing is working on a policy. Tim Burke will actually be working on that policy to come before the board, that we want to implement the same standards for applicants for employment. Okay, so that's just something that's ongoing that we'll be working on as far as employees. Another little project we're working on regarding the CARES Fund is for Section 8. We're looking into getting a fiber optic cable run from the main hub, which is up in the Robeson area, to the Robeson building. And fiber optics is so much faster than regular internet. And then from Robeson down here to the main office to connect with our computers. So, you know, we'll be bringing in Mr. McCoy in procurement for that as well. The engineer's coming out tomorrow, meeting with Ed and looking at the 2 locations, O'Brien and Cardinal. If we are able to do this, get it done in time, the bonus is we can tie in the residents as well for maybe $20, $30 a month. So they won't need Comcast. They can just hook into this system. So that would be a big bonus there. And this would be if we can get it done in time to use those.
That was going to be my next question.
That's-
Do you think that we'll have the opportunity to get this obligated and expended prior to December 31st? Because there's been no discussion with regard to extending that CARES money
Right.
at the moment.
Right. The contractor feels he can do it.
Okay.
We just have to make sure Mr. McCoy feels he can do it. Because we do have to go through, make sure it's procured with HUD regs. We can't circumvent that, so.
The fiber line for Section 8.
This is the first I've heard of a fiber line. Do you want me to step up?
Sure, please, Mr. McCoy. Thank you.
This is the first I've heard of a fiber optic line. What was given to me last week when I returned, was the VoIP system, which I am working on, computer server purchase, which I am working on, PHA web, which is probably the most advantageous of the projects, if we could somehow get that done and procured prior to and being able to finance under the CARES Act. The challenge, as Chairwoman Sahadi I know knows, is the time to procure all of these things, and I believe there's a requirement that we also have it paid, and there may be some gray area on when it's actually installed and functioning and operable and all that, but certainly we have to procure and have the items or the services or the hardware paid for by the end of the year. So we're under a very, very tight window. PHA, which I see as probably the most useful and advantageous of everything that was kind of forwarded to me. Let me back up for a second. The HUD's procurement rules has never allowed us to use state exemptions. Now, while we've gone to a dialogue of, I guess, for lack of a better term, a stalemate on state contracts, they don't let us utilize state exemptions. So when I look at something like PHA Web, while the initial startup cost of $36,000, I believe its annual renewal fees are in 30-something thousand. So as we can all do the math here, within a very short period of time, you're over $100,000. So you have extra disclosure and advertising requirements. And it's also the type of thing that you, or service that you don't want to procure just via a low bid. So what I've been doing Friday and yesterday is reaching out both to the vendor, also researching to see if there are other vendors in Massachusetts that are competitive. And the reason for doing that is kind of on the sole source procurement side. You know, does anyone else do what PHA Web does? And it would appear to me that we're going to have an RFP process. So I've also reached out to other communities, other housing authorities that are utilizing PHA Web. Today, reaching out to both Brookline and Attleboro and waiting for some responses from them. But I think what you're asking me is, are we going to have time to procure all these things? I think it's possible with the server, the VoIP, the floor cleaners and buffers under the guise of using the CARES money. I'm not as confident on the PHA Web because of the short time frame. And while I feel terrible about that, because it's probably would be the most advantageous thing for the overall operation of the housing authority. From what I understand, it covers everything that we do from soup to nuts. And I'm not trying to disparage its foundation is a different kind of local application other than apparently the HAPCO system we currently have. I cannot speak to, and I will meet with Ed first thing in the morning. I cannot speak to the fiber optic item that just came up now. So I'm not sure what it entails. If it is work to a building, there would be also additional procurement requirements, because now we're getting into Chapter 149 issues. So I can work on that first thing in the morning. But my major focus since being back has been trying to see what we can do with this PHA Web. And I am a little worried about it. I'm going to be honest with you, because I'd have to have it back to you by the December board meeting. And again, I'm not quite sure of the eligibility rules as far as payment and implementation. Is December 31st a hard drop dead due date, or can you at least be under agreement with these vendors and move from there, even if this slipped into 2022?
Certainly, I certainly understand.
Did I answer
Money
your?
has to be spent.
It has to be spent, so
Did I
that is very
answer you? I
similar.
didn't mean
You
to be
did,
long-winded.
You did, no.
But I was trying to encapsulate what I was confronted with last week and basically where we stand. And I think some of the things are doable. The late meeting in December is both a curse and a blessing, though, right? I mean, I believe the second Monday is the 11th, 12th, or 13th. So the items like the server and the VoIP, you know, we have a little bit more time to get on that, and there's a quicker implementation. By the same token, for me to get an approval from you in December on a larger process such as PHA Web, I'm not quite as confident with the holidays and whatnot if that'll happen by the 31st.
Certainly. Do we have any idea of what we have left for the Section 8 CARES money and what the estimate of these projects would be?
It was about, the balance available was 900,000, and then the list provided last meeting was about 250. I think Kevin had that. And then the fiber optic is, say, 100,000. I would add 100.
So I believe we're in the 900,000, but my question more importantly is, do we need your permission to spend those CARE Acts? We've already discussed it last month, now again this month. We know what we want to purchase. It's just a matter of Mr. McCoy turning it around. I mean, do we need to come back next month?
Well,
to
let me
say
just
we
jump
want
in.
to
Last meeting, the board did give us permission to
Right.
procure those items, as long as we did it according to rec. So we already have their permission to go with those
Well-
items. Now it's just following the HUD regs.
Right.
Yeah, we're all set with the
So
board.
we don't need to come back
No,
next month.
they've already approved it.
vote.
They would approve the actual purchase, but that could happen in January, if that's what you're getting at.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things, we spend it or we lose it.
Yeah.
So if we spend 20,000 or 30,000 on a telephone system at this point, what does it matter? And I'm not trying to speak irresponsibly, but we're up against it at this point, you know. So even to approve the actual dollar amount, that's going
Yeah.
to drag on.
So just speaking from my knowledge, since I live this CARES and opera money day in and day out, it's my understanding that as long as it's being spent on an eligible expense, you do not need the board or the council or, you know, any other executive, or legislative, I should say, legislative branch voting on anything. So as long as it's eligible.
Just
mean,
ba-
we-
Just
sorry,
based on some of the
Commissioner.
procurement requirements, Tim, I don't see how their time, you're up against their time. I mean, unless-
I'm up against it.
Especially anything with Chapter 149, you'd have to have that ad out this week to appear next week. You're out for 2 weeks.
For the fiber,
Bid.
I have to admit, the fiber optic, I didn't anticipate, so I
see
mean,
it.
but let's just spitball, to use a layperson's term, right? If I can get an RFP out that's in goods and services, so I would have until next Monday. Okay, I can get and I'm talking PHA web, because that's what's kind of been front and center on my table since I did I pretty much set up all of the bids necessary for the on-call trades. The routine stuff we have every year is pretty much ready to go. So on-call trades, executive director of Fall River Joint Tenant Commission did much of that last week and into today. If I can get into goods and services by next Monday, I mean, you have 2 weeks to get proposals for PHA web. Now, the one thing I can say, Commissioner Bentley, is there are not a lot of folks, even throughout New England, that do it. So you're talking about directly contacting the 2 or 3 firms that do it. It's possible. Again, what I can't express to you coherently, because this is, again, I just started looking into this last week, is the implementation of it and what has to, you know, how I cannot imagine, and I'm gonna, if I can add some, you know, you're basically converting your operating system to a brand new system. You know, I have no idea how long that would take. We don't really have the expertise in IT internally to give me much support on that. So I'm going through phone calls and discussions with, I'm not ready to say we can't do it as we sit here right now. I am still conducting research. I think it might be a possibility, but again, I don't know how long the turnover will take. Yeah. So it could be a pipe dream. I may tell you 48 hours from now, Commissioner, that it was a total pipe dream. But if I may, and this is kind of funny because I'm gonna morph into your role from our work together at City Hall. I'm gonna be a little bit conservative here. I agree with everything that's just been said as far as I don't believe CARES forces you to come back to the board and gain permission as long as everything is eligible and it's implemented the way and paid for prior to the 31st. I believe we're all okay. I do not know, and I was going to mention this to you after the meeting, I do not know, Attorney Souza, if this would be a violation of open meeting. So I'm going to say, you know, hypothetically, this was something that would have to be looked into. If in fact we were changing the operational system, I mean, to me, on the safe side, I would at least, again, assuming this can be done legally, have the board polled if that is something that is not a violation of open meeting, rather than just basically, okay, go forward and do it and change your operational system and structure here that governs your rental integrity issues, your Section 8 backup, everything we do in finance, in purchasing and whatnot, just to get the green light and go ahead and do it by virtue of not having that internal specialty and expertise, I would be a little bit nervous. So if in fact this can be done, if we can get responses in, I think we could have those proposals, because I don't anticipate in getting a lot of them. And again, I'm talking of the PHA web, not your phone systems. But I would anticipate that we could get those reviewed relatively quickly. I would just not want to go forward, though, and have a contract signed and say, okay, we're changing the Fall River Housing Authority's operational system, and we're going forward with a brand-new system, and have that just, because, again, God forbid, without the internal expertise, I could be leading you guys down a path of an absolute total headache, and not a situation of crashing, but to where the folks doing their day-to-day operations would be, potentially at a standstill. So that's kind of another conversation, but that's the one contract that I would just not go forward with. And say, okay, if I can procure it in the proper timetable, get proposals in, make a selection, and to just do it, while it's the most advantageous, I wouldn't want to just have that done without a, retouching base with the board to make sure, okay, we're going for this, here's where we stand, this is what the company has said. To me, that's almost a topic for a special meeting, never mind just doing it and paying for it and hoping, that everything falls into place come 12/31. I'm all for it, but I think that the conservative way to go on that, Chairwoman Sahadi, would be, again.
Well, we could certainly do, if you're not even feeling comfortable with the polling, we could certainly do a special meeting.
I don't see how else.
Set something up.
Again, and let's say, and again, Commissioner Bentley, I may tell you 2 days from now that it's a total impossibility, but let's say by Friday, December 3rd, it's possible to get proposals in here and we evaluate, but I don't see, if that meeting is kind of late in December, maybe the 13th, I'm just suggesting that we would have to. It would obviously be the pleasure of the board.
So, Madam Chair, if I may say that and this was on one of my items, by the way, to talk about the system, but I'm glad Mr. McCoy jumped in on that. And part of what I was saying, one of the main points is, we have all these items, we want to do them, we just have to make sure we procure them correctly.
Right.
So that's always been our intent, and that's the way we operate. Now, Finance Director Amber Burns has been working on this project. She has spent many hours on it. We had an all-day presentation, demonstration of the PHA web. Probably had about 35, 40 attendees. Without one single deviation, the facilities director, the finance director, the Director of Housing Management, Director of Section 8, the Deputy Executive Director, all say we should do this change. We have been frustrated at the HAB software now for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. In my mind, it is not dependent on the CARES Fund. It is something that, at this point, given that response from the staff, that should be done regardless. Mr. McCoy should definitely take the pains and aches of making sure we procure this correctly. It's $30,000. That's a drop in the bucket for the inconveniences, the time wasted by employees, downtime, the mistakes, the misinformation that we have to correct and spend time on. And it's, the current software costs us $30,000 a year in maintenance. So is this. The cost is negligible. There's a one-time startup fee of $30,000, which would be the amount that CARES could take into account. But this is a great company, and we'll get into that at a special meeting that has over 600 clients, I think nationwide, 100 in Massachusetts. When I say clients, I'm talking housing authorities. So this is not something that this administration has taken lightly or would ever intend to impart upon the authority lightly, okay? And I'm sure if Amber would like to speak to it, or Kathleen Povar, if the board would like to take the time to hear from them tonight, otherwise we can actually put it on as an agenda item in December, whatever your wishes.
Can I clarify something? I'm not disputing the value of the operational system. What I'm trying to say is, if we procure this legally, I'm not sure that we can be done by December 3rd and paying for it out of the CARES money. I'm not, I believe I was at a presentation in 2019 on PHA Web, and it fell by the wayside, and it seemed great back then. So I'm not, you know, again, I'm not poo-pooing or devaluing. I'm just saying that if there's a decision that if we go past December 31, but we're willing to contribute our operational funds, then beautiful. I'm just stating that if this is strictly going to be paid out of CARES, I'm not sure that a proper procurement procedure could be done, and that whatever has to be done can be put in place by the 31st. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, overriding would be that we do a proper procurement procedure.
Yeah, I'm not trying to devalue
Yeah.
where we're looking to go. It's just the fact that I was told that, I mean, CARES money is funding this, and this has to be done by the end of December, with Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and implemented, and I don't know if there is hardware that goes along with this or anything like that, but certainly the system, it sounds like the system is great, and what I saw in our boardroom approximately, it was pre-COVID, so maybe 2 years ago, seemed excellent also. I think it was a Nick and another gentleman who put on the presentation. I'm just saying, if this is gonna be procured with the CARES money, we couldn't be more up against the wall.
Right, right. No, we're definitely up against the wall.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these companies and entities are really up against the wall and trying to spend the last of their monies, so they don't need to either turn them back if they've been advanced or not draw them down. So, sure, we're just one of many.
Yeah, well, I think you recall I sent that email that New Bedford is sitting on $900,000 because it's related to Section 8, and it doesn't have the opportunities that the public housing program does.
Now, the public housing program you've spent down,
The $1.3 million, sure. Yep, that's all set.
certainly. Thank you.
My last item, we did receive, DHCD for capital funds from the federal CARES money that went to the state, $150 million. DHCD will be allocating to housing authorities for capital needs. So we'll probably see $1 million of that, and that would go towards Maple Gardens, Bishop Eade, or Corky Row. I'm just guessing at the $1 million. They haven't sent out any indication of how they're going to allocate that money, but that's good news too down the road. As you know, we've got a $8 million project going on now at Maple Gardens, primarily thanks to Senator Roderick's through the Gateway Grant. So it's good to get more money.
Excellent.
And that's my report.
Any questions?
Sorry to take so long.
Of the director? Hearing none, we'll move on to new business. Item 1A is a change order number 3 for elevator upgrades at Cardinal Madeira's Towers. The change order number 3 is a credit of $2,065 for eliminating a machine room door and adding a fire watch detail. The contract time will be increased by 20 days. The recommended action is approval. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Second. Any questions or concerns with regard to this?
Madam Chairwoman, I'd like to abstain from this vote. Thank you.
Certainly. Commissioner Burns, you have a question?
So I don't know if it's a wrinkle, but hypothetically, I could be ordering or approving this, which requires a fire detail that I could then be working, and I don't know if that creates a wrinkle issue.
Attorney Souza?
I didn't quite hear that.
The fact that this is adding a fire watch detail, does that preclude Commissioner Burns from voting on this?
I don't believe so.
They've come out all the time. I'm just telling you, I don't ever take them because I don't want anyone to say, "Hey, you ordered it and now you're getting paid extra." But if I shouldn't vote on it anyway, then I'll.
Then we should throw this at a caution. Don't vote on it. We have a quorum to take care of that.
Certainly.
Fair enough.
Well, let's take a roll call on this one, Martha, so you can get the abstentions.
Commissioner Bentley,
Yes.
Commissioner Maderas,
Yes.
Commissioner Burns abstained, Commissioner Underhill abstained, Chairwoman Sahadi.
Yes. Item B is a contract award for a new video security system at Troy Bishop Joseph Eid Apartments. There was one bid, was received and reviewed on October 20th, 2021. And recommended action is to award the contract to the lone bidder, Systems Contracting Incorporated, in the amount of $76,500, including alternate number 1. DHCD has reviewed and approved this contract award.
Motion to approve the contract.
Second.
Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Item C is permission to advertise for interior flooring, trim, and ADA improvements of staffed apartments at 689-1, 9-21 Corbett Street, with an estimated cost of $49,131. The recommended action is approval.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions with regard to this advertisement? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Item D is a contract award for emergency generator repair at Nicholas W. Mitchell Heights. The recommended action is to award the contract to Ralco Electric and Generator in the amount of $24,919.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Item 2 is miscellaneous. 2A is the John Deere subcompact tractors, 2022 TX. I believe that's the model? Yes? Okay, thank you. The recommended action is permission to purchase 3 tractors from United AG and Turf totaling $33,724.26. And this is the item that Mr. Barrows spoke about earlier with regard to this being electric versus gas.
I would prefer to buy electric, and I recommend we do. This is the price for gas.
Oh, this is the price for gas.
Yes, so
Okay, so
my understanding is it'd be about $2,000 more per electric. I'm not sure if the board agrees or wishes that we should purchase electric. I'm not sure how we proceed with this items, whether we table it or whether a motion can be to amend it to buy any electric vehicles.
Mr.
I'll
McCoy,
leave that up to the experts.
please.
While I'm not an expert, I can tell you, I recognize the acronym that Commissioner Bentley used earlier, and I believe we're in a process at City Hall working with Paul Ferland, and that might be a partnership with National Grid. Commissioner Sahadi, I'm not 100% sure, so you need the ports, you need the charging ports.
Excuse me, I don't mean to jump in, but for these vehicles, I'm not sure if they need that sort of overhead.
I'm sorry, if these are just golf carts, that kind of things, or gators
Right.
and electric, then they just plug in.
Right.
You don't need the charging
To
ports
any
for them.
outlet whatsoever?
220
And
probably.
Yeah.
All right, but some sort of a utility
Like a
service
dryer,
outside?
yeah.
Okay.
But
So-
it's not the EV charging station that a car or a truck or a van needs. That's a whole different type of
Okay,
charging
so
station.
these, well, I guess I anticipated these John Deeres, if they're gonna be handling snow
Deere's
and
still
work,
is
that were gonna be a little bit more
Yeah.
industrialized.
Yeah, they
but
won't be doing any snow.
they won't be doing any snow
No
whatsoever.
snow, they're primarily to take the workers
Not yet.
around the sites. These will not have snow removal capability. on them.
Okay, so I imagine then that
Those
that's.
cost about 25,000 each. This is 3 of them for 10,000 each, not 33,000 apiece. That's the total
For
price.
the next meeting.
So yeah,
then why
no
don't-
snow.
so if we can liken these more to golf carts,
Yes.
why don't we we can do a competitive solicitation process to procure these. And then if you like, I can also go a step further and get back with the contacts at City Hall for the other items you suggested, maybe vans and trucks and cars and pickups, and maybe look into that program that the Water Department is currently looking into with National Grid, if that is good with the Executive Director.
Tim, I can send you information on
Sure.
that. Mass EVIP has a whole thing for fleet, trying to electrify your fleet, but also another separate one for installation of EV stations.
Yeah, and as I said, I know we're embarking on that right now because Paul Furlan needed a contact with every department within City Hall.
Yeah, and Paul is
So-
actually the contact individual, so it's for all departments.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be great. I'll take whatever you have and I'll get whatever Mr. Furlan has, and we can
Great.
look on extending the program. But for now, if these things are, again, similar to golf carts, we'll just look to competitively solicit the electrically charged vehicles.
So for this, for tonight, we should table this item then, so we can get the correct
A
information.
dollar amount, if the board's concern is the dollar amount, yeah, I couldn't even speculate as to what that could be. I can, get some quotes. Or if you give me permission to at least advertise and conduct a solicitation process, then we just come back like we normally do to approve the purchase contract.
I'm fine with that.
Sure.
Is everyone fine with that? So can we amend this to indicate, to advertise for 3 John Deere subcompact tractors?
Electric.
Electric, exactly. Do I have a motion to advertise?
Motion to advertise.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Item B is an amendment to the HUD-approved fiscal 2022 annual PHA plan. The recommended action is to approve the proposed revisions to Chapter 4, 2 of the Fall River Housing Authority Section 8 Administrative Plan.
Kathleen, could you address this, please?
Good evening. Basically, this amendment to the PHA plan is to remove what has been determined to be a huge barrier to access to affordable housing in the community. Specifically, our Housing Choice Voucher Program has a particular local preference, which is something that's discretionary, and which can be changed through the policy process, that anybody who's not paying rent, or anybody basically who has an income, is pretty much categorically excluded from getting. It's called the rent burdened preference. And if you look at all previous versions of the Section 8 admin plan, that's always been the top preference. So when it comes to getting people on the waiting list that are going to be eligible for that, it's a crapshoot, because you really can't verify it until you bring them in and calculate their income and find out what their rent is and get those verifications, and then verify all of that with the landlord just to make sure that they can get that waiting list preference upon which you pulled them from the waiting list. It's not very practical. It's an administrative burden. It is arcane. It is not in keeping with the values of the city or the consolidated plan to address homelessness. So I've been advising the leased housing department on their policies for the last year or so, to the best of my abilities and within the confines of my availability in another department that I oversee. And this is so important. It can't wait. It can't wait until April 1st of 2022, when we have already gone through the annual plan process that we do every year, which I think you were mentioning early on at the beginning of the meeting. November is usually the time of year when we start these planning processes. We meet with the RAB, and they basically go through all of our policy propositions and participate in the process. We have that public hearing in January, and then we submit it to HUD for implementation on April 1st, which is the start of the new fiscal year. We can't wait that long. I've consulted with HUD, I've consulted with my colleagues, and my recommendation is really the only thing that's changing, the only kind of material policy change that we're making here is to remove that preference so that we can begin screening applicants on the fundamental threshold criteria that every other housing authority evaluates its pre-screening eligibility applicants, the criteria being their income, their household income and the size of their family. So that should be the determining threshold. And then after that, local, are they a resident of Fall River? So local residents who are income eligible, just like on our public housing side, those are the ones that get the top preference. And that's true for our public housing program, with the exception of we do have an emergency homeless preference, which in rare occasions people can claim they've been displaced by a fire, flood, natural disaster, what have you. So that being said, this meeting that's going to be held, the public hearing that's going to be held on November 15th in this room at 3 p.m. is basically the end of that marks the end of the 45-day comment period, which is mandatory in order to make such a policy amendment. You can't just do that on the fly. It has to go through a public review. We already posted something about 6 weeks ago and 4 weeks ago in the Herald, and inviting the public to come. We certainly welcome the Resident Advisory Board if they would like to come. Although it really applies to the Section 8 programs policies, but it's really an important one. And as we begin to move forward in the new planning year, especially for Section 8, my goal is really to work more closely with the local Homeless Providers Coalition and develop a preference for a new waiting list preference for the homeless population, specific to those who are exiting permanent supportive housing programs, where they've been in case management for the past 12 months. They were previously chronically homeless, but now have been determined self-sufficient and able to take care of themselves, and would require a voucher to do so that they can move out of permanent supportive housing into something that's affordable and more permanent in the form of leasing a unit, but with some subsidy. And we would maybe reserve 25, for example, I'm just throwing out a number, but set aside a certain number of vouchers for people that could get that fixed number that would then cycle through attrition. And we could revisit that. But that's for the big planning year. That's my other chief recommendation. But I want to spend time, like I said, working with the local providers on developing that. And that will happen in this upcoming planning year. However, like I said, this is just so important. It's going to remove such an administrative burden on the tenant selection function in the leased housing department, which is challenged by a very large centralized state waiting list that's difficult to get through. Just on the state public housing side, we have the same issue with CHAMP, which is an onerous, unwieldy system, and it's very prescriptive in how we use it. Well, this is almost like the opposite. It's unwieldy, but there really isn't much structure to it other than that. And I really feel like this will be a service not only to the housing authority in terms of streamlining operations, which is one of the reasons why I was brought in to help on that task in the first place, but it will also serve the community better. So we're not wasting our time spinning our wheels, determining whether or not somebody's rent burdened. If we're low income, we're rent burdened. I mean, it's just a fact of life. That's what the poverty line is all about. It's why we have it. So we kind of know how to determine whether someone's eligible. And how much they pay in rent is really it's sort of prohibitive, and it's exclusionary and at the expense of people living in shelters or people who are maybe staying with family temporarily as they try to figure out where they're going to go. If they have low income, they meet the other criteria. So that's what this is about. That's in layman's terms. That's what this is about.
And what drove this was that out of our vouchers, we have 2,400 vouchers available to us, and under lease is only about 2,050. And we've been steady.
It's been net
years.
zero.
And
Net
it's-
zero enrollments. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really, now that I have an opportunity to really look at the data and look at the history of this program's performance, I just feel like there's going to be more change afoot in terms of policy and in terms of procedure. And I'm very happy to get, the ball rolling with that. I've been working very closely with the Director of Leased Housing. And we have a punch list of items that we want to do. Probably not going to happen overnight. It took me a couple of years to get the ACOP in order. But I think that this will be good all across the board. I think it checks all the boxes for me. I think landlords will be happy when we know that maybe our staff resources are being focused in a good way that's more efficient. That'll also be better customer service for our applicants and our participants. It's good public relations. So that's what we're looking at here. And so once we hold that public meeting, the public hearing on the 15th, after that, basically the next day, I want to hit the implement button. Because really, honestly, it's just a practice. We're just going to be able to remove that from our selection criteria and proceed accordingly. Really, nothing else changes. It's just basically taking a huge roadblock out of the way. So by approving this proposition tonight for implementation pending the conclusion of that hearing, I don't want to waste any more time. I don't want to wait until December. So that's why we're asking for your approval on this item tonight.
Does anyone have any questions for Kathleen?
One quick question.
Commissioner
Did you say
Burns?
during your information that this is what other housing authorities already do? So are we being brought in line with other housing authorities, or are we leading the way?
I honestly think I asked what other housing authorities have a rent burden preference, and I think the answer in Massachusetts was like 2 or 3, and we were among the 2 or 3. And we're a large one. We're the 6th largest. So, I mean, maybe for a tiddlywink housing authority, in northwestern Massachusetts, it's not as much of a, it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense for a waiting list our size.
I appreciate that presentation. I certainly caught on to your sense of urgency with it, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, so you were explaining that there's going to be a public hearing?
Yes.
On the 15th, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what types of feedback do you expect from that?
Well, we've done them annually, and most of the attendance is usually rather low, and it's usually the members of the Resident Advisory Board who have participated in the planning process, and it ends up kind of being more of a formality. We do it, we present all of those changes, and it goes on record, because that's something that we're required to do under those public comment.
Just from a
environments.
procedural standpoint, does it seem like the cart before the horse, us approving it now and then going to a hearing, or should we be approving it after the hearing?
Whether or not, the hearing is a formality. There's no vote. It's just a box that we have to, it's something that has to happen.
Okay, but are there any topics or concerns that could be brought up at that hearing that haven't been considered?
I highly doubt it.
Yeah.
And I welcome you all to attend. Our Homeless Providers Network, we have representation coming. From what I heard at one of the last meetings I went to, Mary Camaro, who chairs the Mayor's Task Force to End Homelessness, actually mentioned, on the 15th we have that hearing, so I'm hoping that she comes. But I know that I welcome any objection. I welcome comment. I welcome it.
And do we, I apologize, I'm new to the board, but why this provision had been in place previously for a Fall River resident? Like, was there a purpose it was put in place originally?
I honestly can't give you a good explanation for why, other than, I honestly don't know. It's been around, no one's really taken a long, hard look at the policy and figured out what is discretionary and what is mandate. Everyone I've spoken to in the leased housing department just assumed that we all just had to do it. We don't. It's discretionary. It's an admissions policy. HUD gives us the latitude to make those local decisions and work with our the municipality, the local municipality, to kind of come together on something like that. It's a community issue, which is why we can't just do a snap change, right? So that's why we're doing it in this formal setting, because HUD doesn't want housing authorities to have that ability to, at every different board meeting, change the way that they manage their waiting list. Because there's a lot of fair housing rules that we have to follow when you're talking about waiting list management. You can't just say, I'm not throwing things around preference, like it's just anything. I mean, it's like you can't select people from your waiting list. You have to follow your policy. It's Bible. So that's why, that's what they're doing. They're doing the right thing in leased housing. It's not like they're doing the wrong thing. They're following their admin plan. The admin plan is a mess.
And Commissioner, excuse me, Kathleen, if I may just add, the Section 8 department for years had been running by the same admin plan, which are the rules governing how things are done, sets the wait list preference and whatnot. And one of the reasons Kathleen is now in charge of that department is a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, I said, we need to really dig into why we're not leasing up more. And Kathleen is a guru for HUD regs, how to apply them, and then how to make the staff work and achieve what we're after. And this is part of the fruits, I think, of putting her in this spot. It had been a department that had just been operating status quo, if you will. And I think the expertise to perform this kind of analysis, comparison, needed Kathleen's attention. And so she's done a fabulous job. And I think you're hearing from her that there's probably going to be more items coming down the pike.
Mm-hmm. This is just the beginning. I just couldn't wait another, especially we're really talking about utilization right now. And it also took me a while to ramp up in terms of understanding this entire body of policy, all the regs, how this program works, what it's supposed to look like. I had to teach myself all of that, because I'm a public housing person and I've been doing public housing for the last 7 years. So this has been a huge learning curve for me. And as I'm learning, as I'm observing, these are the recommendations. And this just, I can't let down that department. I mean, they're all really excited about this change. It's only going to benefit. It's going to save us a lot of time and get to those people on the waiting list that need housing. Because honestly, everybody, once we remove that rent burden preference, if you're on the waiting list and you're income eligible, boom, now we can and you live in Fall River, that's it. Verification's complete. You've got the top preference. So now we'll start the screening process. Let's do the criminal background checks. Let's do the, all the other certifications and things that have to be done pre-enrollment. But when you're just, you can't even get to that step because you're trying to figure out whether or not they were eligible for the preference under which you selected them. It's silly. It's maddening and senseless. And so, yeah. I really do welcome someone to come by and try and challenge it, because there's only reasons to do this and no reasons not to.
Any other questions
You're
of
welcome.
Kathleen? What is the pleasure of the board?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item 3 is personnel. 3A is the resignation of employees. The recommended action is to accept the resignation of Jack Machado, effective November 5, 2021, and Kaylee Reth, effective November 12, 2021.
Motion to accept the resignations.
Second.
Do I need roll call for this, Martha?
I can do it. Commissioner Barnes?
Yes.
Commissioner Bentley?
Yes.
Commissioner Underhill?
Yes.
Commissioner Maderas?
Yes.
Chairwoman Sahadi.
Yes. Item B is Rental Integrity Program Specialist. The recommended action is permission to advertise for a contracted services, and this would be part-time. Would you like to fill us in?
Sure,
Please.
this is a position that's responsible for determining if there's any fraud being conducted in the Section 8 department, or if it's brought to that person's attention to follow up on it and ensue in determining if monies are owed to the Housing Authority and then going after that. We had a employee retire several months ago. We posted it, advertised, and we found no one qualified. This former employee has indicated they would come back part-time. We think the job can be done part-time, which would mean more revenue for us, just the way the financials work with HUD. Same job getting done, not skipping on the corners or anything, but that's our thought. So she'd be willing to come back for about 20 hours a week. So that's where we're kind of targeting it, although it is opened up to anyone in the community. If they applied, we definitely would look at the resume. But that's our aim.
Does anyone have any questions with regard to this contract employee or contract position? Because it will not, I'm assuming there'll be a 1099?
Correct, no benefits.
No benefits. And you'll leave the position open and advertised?
Actually, because they were an employee, I think it's a 1099. If they come back and they have to go on a W-2, though, there'll be no benefits, though. Just have to check because of the retirement board and the fact that it was a former employee, but there will be no benefits either way. I just remember when the former executive director was a contractor, he actually got a W-2. So I don't know if that's...
I don't know.
Yeah, but there will be no benefits. I'm sorry, was there another question?
I did not have another question. Does anyone have any other questions with regard to this position? Do I have a motion to advertise for this contract service position?
Motion to advertise.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item C is a leased housing support assistance position. The recommended action is to approve the reposting in-house and outside posting if necessary.
Yeah, we posted for this position, well, it was approved and we posted, this was pre-COVID. Then COVID hit and it just didn't get done for I think the obvious reasons. So I just thought it would be prudent to bring it back in front of the board just because I didn't think it was fair just to say, well, they already approved it and let's go do it. This position, though, will be to support the lease up in the Section 8 department. You have a position description in front of you. It's also a multifunctional position within the Section 8 department, but primarily it's going to help with the lease up. So that's part of our strategy to, again, get those vouchers utilized.
And this position's been vacant for all this time?
This actually was a new position, right, Tim? Yeah, this was a new position. Again, yes. So the position description actually has already been approved.
So this is
We
just to advertise?
Yes. Post it first. Actually, we'll do them concurrently, just in case we don't have anyone inside that pans out.
Certainly. Does anyone have any questions with regard to this position? Do I have a motion to advertise the position?
Motion to advertise.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item D is a COLA increase for the executive director, and item E is I guess the same item, a COLA increase for the executive director. At this time, my recommendation would be to table both D and E until the evaluations that have been prepared are tabulated, and once they're tabulated, we can discuss the evaluations at the next meeting and potentially go into executive session to discuss the executive director's contract, if that is agreeable with each of you.
Motion to table?
Do I have a second to table?
Second.
And that's for items D and E combined. Martha, will you take a roll call on that, please?
Commissioner Maderas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bentley?
Yes.
Commissioner Burns?
Yes.
Commissioner Underhill?
Yes.
Chairwoman Sahadi?
Yes. I don't believe there's any other business to come before us, so do I have a motion to adjourn? Oh,
Yeah.
certainly. At this particular point, I'm going to designate Commissioner Burns, because he was late tonight. So that's going to be his job.
That was gonna be my choice, too.
You know, sometimes other people are late, and I can't wait to hand out punishments.
Will you accept the duties?
I accept.
Okay, so we are appointing Commissioner Burns to tabulate the evaluations.
I second that.
You second that? Okay, we're all set. I don't believe we need a motion on that. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.